What's up, everyone? This is Steve with the MMA Minute, and welcome to the MMA Minute Show. Today is a very special episode as we finally made it to UFC 300. No matter what side of the fence you stand on, we all have to admit this card is massive and will for sure be the biggest of 2024. This is a card stacked with current champions, former interim champions, the number one contenders, legends, and more. We will go over my full card picks and predictions for every single fight. Timestamps and chapters are down below if you want to skip around. And if you're interested in our full betting guide, you'll get access to not just my bets and picks, but 2 other MMA betting analysts, 3 people for the price of 1. Link is in the description. And if you made it this far, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment down below. For my picks, I'll start with the main card first, working from bottom to top, and then I'll work my way through the prelims and early prelims. Let's get into it. First fight of the main card, Bo Nickal taking on Cody Brundage. Nickal is minus 3,000, which is a record-setting number. He's 6'1", 28 years old, 76-inch reach, taking on Brundage, who is plus 1,100, 6 foot, 29 years old, has a 72-inch reach. Of all the current UFC legends on the roster, the future Hall of Famers, the current champs, former champs, interim champs, even all the top 5 ranked fighters in the world, we get Bo freaking Nickal opening the main card of UFC 300. What a world. If you don't know Bo by now, you are living under a rock. In his last fight, he closed as a minus 1,600 favorite. Round 1 destruction of Val Woodburn against Jamie Pickett, closed as a minus 2,000 favorite. Round 1 arm triangle. And his 2 fights before that were on Dana White's Contender Series, where he was a minus 2,800 and a minus 1,600 favorite. Yep, you guessed it. He won both of those, also by first round finish. The point being, Bo Nickal is one of, if not the most hyped up fighter of all time. He is a former D1 collegiate wrestling god who's transitioned over to MMA, and since joining American Top Team, has basically been crowned a future UFC champ. It's a hilarious thing to say, but Cody Brundage is his stiffest test to date. Brundage also comes from a wrestling background, not quite the level of Bo Nickal, but he still has a solid wrestling base. He also has a wildly aggressive striking game that basically makes him kill or be killed every time he steps into the octagon. He constantly gets into chaotic fights, and he's either finishing you in round 1 or he's completely gassing out and getting finished himself. So with that said, I'll absolutely take a stab at some Brundage round 1 prop plays. I think the Brundage round 1 finish is plus 3,500. Definitely worth a sprinkle, but it's Bo Nickal all day outside of that. Good luck finding any sort of value. I'll say Bo gets it done. Round 1 submission. Next fight on the card, we have Charles Oliveira taking on Arman Tsaryukan. This is a fight that probably headlines 90% of other cards. Oliveira, plus 190. 5'10", 34 years old, 74-inch reach, taking on Tsaryukan, who's now minus 235. He is 5'7", 27 years old, has a 72.5-inch reach. Personally, this is the fight I'm most looking forward to on UFC 300. Obviously, I love Charlie Olives. How could you not? But I also happen to be a huge fan of Arman Tsaryukan, and I've been singing his praises as a future UFC champ for a while now. He is perfect in the UFC with 8 total wins, except 2 losses on his resume. One was the UFC debut against the current lightweight champ, Islam Makhachev. He took that fight on short notice and still gave Islam one of his toughest fights yet. And the other was an egregious decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot, a decision that still baffles me to this day because I literally scored it 4-1 for Arman. He arguably has the second best wrestling/grappling game in the division. He has durability, a good chin, 5-round cardio. He's always in ridiculous shape, and his striking game is improving greatly fight after fight. He takes on the former lightweight champion in Charles Oliveira, who's coming off a dominant round 1 TKO win over the former title contender Beneil Dariush, which proves that the motivation is still there after dropping the belt to Islam the fight before. He has wins over Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. The list goes on. His stand-up game is deadly. His submission game might be the best the UFC has ever seen, and he's been at the absolute top of the sport, proving he can beat just about anybody not named Islam Makhachev. This is an unbelievable fight, but if there's one thing we know about Charles Oliveira, it's that if you have confidence in your wrestling game and you can take this man down while staying out of harm's way, Charles will break, and that's exactly what Arman brings to the table. So I do like Arman in this spot. I respect the game of Charles Oliveira and the danger he possesses, but Arman will get this done, and I will say by round 2 knockout. Next fight, we have Justin Gaethje taking on Max Holloway. Gaethje is minus 175. He is 5'11", 35 years old, 70-inch reach, taking on Holloway, who is the plus 145 underdog. 5'11", 32 years old, has a 69-inch reach. And the BMF belt is back in for what, the third time now. Masvidal beat Nate Diaz. Justin Gaethje beat Dustin Poirier. And now Gaethje defends his belt against Max Holloway. Max Holloway is a lifelong featherweight who is probably the third greatest 145er of all time behind Jose Aldo and Volkanovski. After losing to Conor McGregor way back in 2013, Max rattled off 13 straight wins, which included him defeating Jose Aldo for the 145 belt and subsequently rattling off 3 straight title defenses. He's most known for his incredibly high pace, his unlimited cardio, unlimited volume, and his willingness to fight anybody, anywhere, from dangerous up-and-comers to former champions. This man never backs down from a fight, and he usually comes out on top. He's moving up to 155 to take on the BMF champion Justin Gaethje, who is quickly building his name as one of the greatest fighters ever to never win a belt. He's knocked out guys like Edson Barbosa, Donald Cerrone, Tony Ferguson, and Dustin Poirier, and he also holds wins over Michael Chandler and Rafael Fiziev, which proves his value as a legit top 5 contender. He has some of the slickest striking in the game, trains with one of the best coaches out there in Trevor Whitman, and is noted to be one of the hardest hitters in this division. Straight up, I don't think Max belongs up at lightweight. Justin matches his volume, his pace, his durability, his cardio, and he's the one who hits a lot harder. Max didn't have pop down at 145, and I don't think that helps him in this fight against Gaethje. When Max fought Dustin Poirier at 155, Max actually outstruck him based on the numbers, but the power edge clearly went to Dustin, who hurt Max multiple times. I'll go as far to say that I actually think Justin is going to be the first person to ever stop Max Holloway, and I'll say he gets it done by TKO in round 3. Next fight, we have the co-main event. Zhang Weili taking on Xionan. Weili is now minus 500. She's 5'4", 34 years old, 63-inch reach, taking on Xionan, who is plus 350. She is 5'5". She is also 34 years old, and she is also has a 63-inch reach. In this spot, we have 2 Chinese women's MMA fighters. And honestly, this would have made for a great main event if the UFC decided to host a card over in China. Xionan started out perfect in the UFC with 6 straight wins, all 6 by decision, but she showed how highly skilled she is on the feet. She earned a step up in competition, but dropped a bad loss to Carla Esparza, getting finished midway through round 2. After that, she lost a close split decision to Marina Rodriguez, another talented striker, but then bounced back big time with back-to-back wins over Mackenzie Dern and former champ Jessica Andrade, who she KO'd early in round 1. She has momentum on her side and has rightfully earned her first title shot against Zhang Weili. Weili is another killer in this division. After just 3 wins in the UFC, Weili got a quick title shot and also knocked out Jessica Andrade in round 1 to become champ. She then went to war with Joanna Jędrzejczyk in one of the greatest women's MMA fights of all time. She beat her by decision, lost her belt to Rose, lost again to Rose, and is now sitting on a 3-fight win streak where she has returned to glory and is your current strawweight champion. She's a violent striker on the feet, but she has heavily improved her wrestling game and has turned herself into one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world today. Xionan is without a doubt a problem on the feet, but her lack of grappling skills has been her downfall. Carla Esparza took her down 3 times and embarrassed her, and many other women have been able to take her down multiple times in fights. If Weili decides to stand with Jan, this will play out very close, but if Weili is smart, which I very much believe she is, she will mix in the wrestling and dominate the fight. Esparza got Jan out of there quickly, and I think Weili will do the same. Give me Weili and still round 2 submission. And that brings us to the main event of the night. You have the champion, Alex Pereira, taking on the former champion, Jamahal Hill. Pereira is minus 130, 6'4", 36 years old, 79-inch reach, taking on Hill, who is the plus 110 underdog, also 6'4", 32 years old, also has a 79-inch reach. The double champ Alex Pereira is back at 205, making his first title defense in the light heavyweight division. We all know the story of Alex Pereira, a world-class kickboxer who transitioned to MMA and quickly found massive success. After just 3 fights in the UFC, he challenged longtime rival Israel Adesanya for the middleweight belt and ended up finishing him in round 5 to shock the world. He lost to Izzy in the rematch, but bounced back nicely with a win over Jan Blachowicz, and then most recently finished Jiri Prochazka to solidify his legacy as a double champ at 185 and 205. At middleweight, he's an absolute freak of nature, standing 6'4" with a 79-inch reach, and even at 205, that huge frame matches up well with just about anybody. He's a talented striker who likes to play the long game by investing in low kicks, slowing down his opponents, and waiting for the perfect time to land the kill shot. Pound for pound, he's probably the most dangerous striker on the planet. And he's taking on another talented striker, former light heavyweight champion Jamahal Hill. Hill last fought in January of 2023, where he defeated Glover Teixeira by decision, beating him 50-44 on every single scorecard. He has very underrated boxing skills, volume for days, cardio for days, and even power for days. And unless you're taking this guy down, he's been looking almost unbeatable on the feet. And that's exactly the type of matchup we're going to see. Striker versus striker. The 2 things I'll be looking for here are, 1, how does Hill deal with the low kicks of Alex? Because Johnny Walker was able to smash Hill's legs for the 1 round the fight actually lasted. And Hill is coming off a nasty Achilles tendon injury, which is infamous for being one of the worst sports injuries possible. Also, what's going to happen when Hill pressures Alex and has to deal with his dangerous counter shots? Because Alex has a killer left hand that could put anyone out at any time. This feels like a true 50-50 fight with both guys showing they are strikers of the highest caliber. I don't have a strong read either way, but I'm going with Alex Pereira to do what he does best, invest in the low kicks, slow Hill down, break him down, and eventually find a finish. Give me Pereira and still round 3 knockout. And that takes us to the prelims. First fight, we have Jiri Prochazka taking on Aleksandar Rakic. Prochazka plus 100 as the slight underdog, 6'3", 31 years old, 80-inch reach, taking on Rakic, who is minus 120. He is 6'4", 32 years old, has a 78-inch reach. Jiri has had a wildly successful UFC run in such a short time. He made his UFC debut in 2020, finishing Volkan Ozdemir in round 2, starched Dominic Reyes in a back-and-forth war, and then in just his 3rd UFC fight, defeated Glover Teixeira to become the light heavyweight champ of the world in what was one of the greatest comebacks of all time. He's an unorthodox striker who keeps his hands low and hides his attacks, but when he explodes forward, he has massive fight-ending power, and he will walk through multiple shots just to land a few of his own. He'll use his wrestling if needed, and he actually does a good job scrambling out of trouble, which we saw in the Glover fight where he had 4 reversals. He's a big-time fan favorite, and it's great he's back on here for UFC 300. Aleksandar Rakic, meanwhile, has been slowly climbing the ranks. He has 6 wins in the UFC so far, and he was looking great in his biggest fight yet against Jan Blachowicz until a knee injury led to a stoppage in round 3. He's an extremely smart fighter. His hands are always up, throwing feints or misdirections. He throws a nice 1-2 down the middle and then works in the low kicks. He'll also slow the fight down, clinch you up, and work for takedowns. Rakic is likely the more skilled fighter here. He's very technical and likes to play it safe. And while that works against a lot of fighters, playing it safe versus Jiri might not be an option because Jiri causes chaos no matter what. And that will throw Rakic off his game. I like Jiri to win with pressure, aggression, and damage, but Rakic is very tough. I'll say Jiri wins by decision. Next fight, Aljamain Sterling taking on Calvin Kattar. Kattar plus 140 as the underdog. Sterling minus 170 as the favorite. 5'11" for Kattar, 36 years old, 72-inch reach. Sterling is 5'7", 34 years old, has a 71-inch reach. This is actually one of my favorite fights on the card as well, and I can't wait for the return of the New England Cartel superstar Calvin Kattar to get back in there. It's been a little bit of a rocky road for my boy Calvin. He flat out got embarrassed by Max Holloway, who landed 445 significant strikes. That record will probably never be broken, and it pains me that Calvin is tied to that stat. He gets an impressive win over Giga Chikadze after that, but then loses a bullshit split decision to Josh Emmett, a fight he probably won. And then he blows out his ACL mid-fight against Arnold Allen. That was 1.5 years ago, and now my guy Calvin Kattar is back. At his best, he's an extremely tough and gritty striker with strong boxing skills, vicious knockout potential, high volume, good cardio, and just a relentless will to never stop fighting. Aljamain Sterling, former bantamweight champ, is making his debut at 145 here. We all knew Aljo was big for 135, so making this move up shouldn't have any negative impacts. The Funk Master isn't known for his knockout power by any means, but he has a very unorthodox and awkward style of striking. What he lacks in power, he makes up for in volume and pace, and of course, the grappling game is second to none. Once this guy gets you down, he does a great job racking up control time, eventually finding the back, and either dominates the entire round or eventually finds a submission. He's fought anybody who's anybody down at 135, and he truly is one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. The biggest question mark for me here is, can Aljo get this fight to the ground? If he does, of course, he's got a strong chance of winning. But Calvin has a 91% takedown defense rating, and really the only guy to give him problems was Zabit Magomedsharipov, who was massive for 145. And in that fight, Calvin was breaking Zabit down and probably would have won had that fight been 5 rounds. I actually love Calvin in this spot. If his takedown defense holds up and the knee is healed, he'll definitely get better of Aljo on the feet, especially in the power department. Give me Calvin to spoil Aljo's 145 debut by decision. Next fight, Holm taking on Kayla Harrison. Holm plus 350, 5'8", 42 years old, 69-inch reach, taking on Harrison, who is minus 500. She's also 5'8", 33 years old, has a 66-inch reach. Kayla Harrison is finally in the UFC. It's been a long time coming, and we all clearly wish this was Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison at 145, but the former 2-time Olympic champion in judo is now making her UFC debut down to 135 against the 42-year-old Holm. Harrison trains at American Top Team. She has a near perfect record in MMA with 16 wins and 1 loss. That 1 loss coming to Larissa Pacheco, who is no doubt a great fighter in her own right. Harrison will, without a doubt, be looking to take this fight to the mat. She's in incredible shape, shows tremendous strength, and is able to secure takedowns at any point in the fight. She has nasty ground and pound and good submissions to go with it. Holm, another former champ on this card, has actually looked half decent recently. She was beating Bueno Silva until she got caught in a submission. She dominated Yana Santos, took Ketlin Vieira 5 hard rounds, lost by split, even though I thought she won, and decisioned Irina Aldana and the current champ Rocky Pennington before that. The only 2 fighters to ever get her down more than once in a fight was Miesha Tate and Valentina Shevchenko, 2 former champs and all-time UFC greats. For me, all eyes are on the weigh-ins. There has to be legitimate concerns about Kayla making 135, and I for sure wouldn't be surprised if this ends up at a catchweight. Kayla is going to be the best wrestler Holly has probably ever faced, Ronda Rousey included. So Kayla is the rightful favorite and my official pick. But with those weight cut concerns, I can't recommend a minus 500 line, which is only parlayable at this point. Give me Kayla to win by decision. Next fight, we have Sodiq Yusuff taking on Diego Lopes. Yusuff is a plus 115 underdog. He's 5'9", 30 years old, 71-inch reach, taking on Lopes, who is minus 135, 5'11", 29 years old, has a 72.5-inch reach. Diego Lopes has skyrocketed as a future star in the UFC. His UFC debut against Movsar Evloev shows a pretty one-sided decision loss, but he had Evloev in extremely dangerous submissions that probably work on 90% of the division. Evloev is just so damn experienced and well-versed as a grappler. It didn't work out, but his stock rose without a doubt. Since then, he has exploded with 2 straight wins, both by round 1 finish, one over Gavin Tucker by armbar and one over Pat Sabatini by TKO. He's improving his game each step of the way, and if his striking can ever match his grappling game, he's going to be a damn problem for anyone. Sodiq Yusuff has comfortably been in the top 15 now for quite some time. He's not as flashy or as exciting as Diego Lopes, but he's very technical, very defensive, throws clean, straight shots, works the jab, and backs his opponents down with good forward pressure. He's also extremely durable, has good 3-round cardio, and his grappling game seems to be serviceable. He's worked in takedowns of his own. He's shown grappling improvements, and that's going to be the biggest question mark in this fight. I think on the feet, Yusuff has a clear advantage. Lopes is too wild, and Yusuff doesn't play those games. And while Lopes has a nasty submission game, sometimes he's way too comfortable spending time on his back. We saw that against Brito in his Dana White's Contender Series fight, and we saw that against Evloev as well. I am leaning dog in this spot. Lopes might be biting off more than he can chew. I love his potential, but Yusuff is a big step up from Tucker and Sabatini. Give me Sodiq to slow this fight down and win by decision. Next fight, On to the early prelims here. We have Jalin Turner taking on Moicano. Turner is the -235 favorite, 6'3", 28 years old, 77-inch reach, taking on Moicano, +190, 5'11", 34 years old, 72-inch reach. Two fan favorites standing off against each other here, and one of the last fights to be added to this supercard. Jalin Turner is a freak of nature for the 155 weight class. 6'3", 77-inch reach. He makes welterweights look small, and that makes him a tricky matchup for just about anyone because the game plan against this guy should be to immediately get him to the ground where he's least dangerous. But that's not entirely true because, yes, he does have massive knockout power, but he also has a great submission game. Just ask Brad Riddell, who got hurt and guillotine choked in less than a minute. And yes, he went to split decision with Dan Hooker, but he delivered one of the cleanest, most devastating head kicks you'll ever see. And anyone else not named Dan Hooker goes to bed after a shot like that. Flat out, this guy's a problem for at least 1.5, maybe 2 rounds. But if you can push a pace on him, he can fade as the fight goes on. Renato Moicano is a former featherweight, now up at lightweight, where he also has decent size for the division. He's a good enough striker with solid volume, but this guy's game plan is to get you to the mat or take your back at all costs. And once he gets you in a bad position, he makes the most of the opportunity using his lanky frame to suffocate you and eventually lock in a submission. Basically, this is a clash of styles. The dangerous, powerful striker in Turner versus the tricky grappling artist in Moicano. I like Turner in the spot, who has multiple paths to victory. He's dangerous everywhere, and Moicano has been finished multiple times in the UFC. Plus, his cardio is questionable as well. Give me Turner to chin Moicano, round 1 knockout. Next fight, we have Andrade taking on Rodriguez. Andrade -125, 5'1", 32 years old, has a 62-inch reach. Taking on Rodriguez, who's +105, 5'6", 36 years old, has a 65-inch reach. Marina Rodriguez opened as a +140 underdog, and the line has swung to her as a slight favorite, and then it kind of moved back as to Jessica Andrade as a slight favorite, and Marina sitting as a slight underdog. I'm a big Marina Rodriguez fan, and I always knew she'd be a standout in this division. She's one of the few women's MMA fighters who has a legit high-level striking game. She has good size, good reach. She's landing nearly 5 significant strikes per minute. She shows strong striking defense and has big power in her shots. Her takedown defense is improved, but that's her one glaring weakness. So when she takes on good grapplers like Verna Handaroba or Carla Esparza, it's always a cause for concern. Jessica Andrade is another former champ on this card. She's coming off a dominant knockout win over Mackenzie Dern, where she made Dern look like an amateur on the feet and actually recorded 4 total knockdowns in just 2 rounds of action. But that's what Andrade has to offer. She's extremely tough, always moving forward, loads up on big strikes, and has an under-the-radar submission game as well. Andrade will always be live against any fighter because of her danger factor, and we did just see Marina get KO'd by Lemos, who is a great Andrade comparable. But overall, I think Marina's size, reach, and technical striking will be too much for the former champ. Unless Jessica decides to wrestle heavy, I think she loses this fight. Give me Marina to win by decision. And the next fight here, Bobby Green taking on Jim Miller. Bobby Green -185, 5'10", 37 years old, 71-inch reach. Miller is +155, 5'8", 40 years old, 71-inch reach. Everyone knows this by now, but Jim Miller fought on UFC 100, UFC 200, and now he takes on Bobby Green at UFC 300. Hats off to a legend of the sport. That type of durability and longevity is such a rarity these days. And what's crazy is that Jim Miller at age 40 is 5-1 in his last 6. Some of the names are very low level, but Donald Cerrone and Gabriel Benitez ain't half bad either. He has this heavy forward pressure style where he's loading up on his shots, dealing out some massive damage, and he's still flexing his grappling skills with 2 recent wins coming by way of submission. He's taking on King Bobby Green, who is actually 37 years old, and he's had some mixed success in the UFC recently prior to getting starched by Jalin Turner. He finished Grant Dawson as a huge underdog in less than 35 seconds, and he arm triangled the corpse of Tony Ferguson in round 3. He fights with high confidence, keeps his hands super low, fires from the hip, and typically looks excellent staying at range and unloading high volume on his opponents. He has half-decent wrestling and grappling skills, but he loves banging it out on the feet. This seems similar to the Drew Dober fight for me. Green can stay on the outside and pick and poke at Miller all day long if he wants to, but Jim Miller loves to pressure and explode forward with a barrage of big shots. So the question is, can Jim catch him? Or will Green cruise to a decision? It's a little biased, but how can you not root for Jim Miller here? I'll take a shot on the underdog round 3 knockout in epic come-from-behind fashion. And that takes us to the last fight that we're breaking down, which is actually the first fight on the early prelims. Deveison Figueiredo taking on Cody Garbrandt. Figueiredo minus 300, 5'5", 36 years old, 68-inch reach. Taking on Cody 240, 5'8", 32 years old, has a 65.5-inch reach. Figgy opened as a minus 150 favorite and got as high as minus 350, which is insane to me. He made his 135 debut against Rob Font and came away with a dominant decision win, a clean 30-27 across the board. Figgy is undersized for this weight class, typically giving up size and reach, but he adds on muscle no problem, and the power seems to translate over well. He's a clean striker with legit pop in his hands, mixes in the grappling well, has good submissions on his record, and he's one of the greatest flyweights of all time, so he has a world of experience and confidence for days. He's taking on fellow former champ Cody No Love Garbrandt. Cody had one of the greatest title fight performances ever when he defeated Dom Cruz by decision back in 2016. He has elite boxing skills, elite footwork, speedy hands, and legit one-shot knockout power. He does have wrestling in his back pocket, but he typically likes to stand and bang, which is a blessing and a curse because while he's very skilled on the feet, he's been knocked out 4 times in the UFC. I've gone back and forth on this one, and I don't have a problem with Figgy as a favorite, but 3-1, that just doesn't sit well with me. I think Cody has a real speed advantage and the necessary footwork to stay out of danger. I realize the chin and the fight IQ is always a concern, but something tells me Cody gets the win here. Give me no love to pull off the upset by decision. That's the show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck with your bets this weekend and enjoy the card of a lifetime.